just get on your bike and ride. It's you don't have to bike 100 kilometers your first day. You can just do 5 if you want. You could do 15, do whatever you can. And then the more you do it, the easier it gets. And soon enough, you'll be biking across the country maybe. Or if you're into climbing, you might climb the next grade higher. It just takes work and perseverance and a positive attitude. So I'm Natalie Corvette. I am 31 years old and I'm currently biking from Alaska to Argentina. Today is day 159. So it's been a trip so far. I always like bike touring. I love the adventure. You get to see a lot more of wherever you're traveling because you go so much slower. And initially I had planned this trip to just bike across Canada because I'd already done a US tour like 5 years ago, and I was like, well, I want to see Jasper, Banff, and I want to go see some friends in Montreal. And then it turns out most of my friends are from Colombia, and they're like, well, after I finish Canada, I'll just head south to Colombia. And then my next logical train of thought was, well, I might as well just do the whole Pan American Highway then. And so that's how I decided to go from an east-west trip, or west-east trip, to a north-south. And here I am. So back in May, I biked across the state of Washington. I went and visited a friend in Spokane who's a professor out there. And then I did a 6-day trek across the state to Olympia where I have an aunt and uncle. And I used that bike across Washington trip as a nice warm-up for this longer trip. After that I flew to Fairbanks and biked to Denali National Park. And then I went back to Fairbanks after that to restock on food before heading up to the Arctic Ocean on the Dalton Highway, which was still the hardest part of the trip so far. It just the most intense and most remote I've ever been on a bicycle. And then I headed south through the Yukon, British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, then back into Minnesota for a wedding. And hung out there with some friends and family for 2 months before heading back to Seattle, and then biking south from Seattle through Oregon to California, and now I'm in LA. And you get there, you're then biking in just pure Arctic tundra, so you're in no trees, there's just grass, there's nothing else. And so there's nothing to stop the winds. And so I was on my last day just trying to get to Dead Horse, Alaska, which is the end of the Dalton Highway. And I was going downhill at like between a 1% to 2% grade, and I couldn't physically even pedal my bike against it. I had to push my bike downhill into the wind to just even make forward progress. And at one point, the wind gust was so strong it actually knocked me and my bike over. And I ended up just calling it. And I just ended up hitchhiking like the last 10 miles because it was going to take me hours to even just get to the hotel. And I only had 1 hour left to get to the buffet at the hotel. So it was biking the last bit or eating to my heart's content, and food won. During my rides during the day, I'll just eat a lot of Pop-Tarts. It's high in sugar and calories. So like one bag of it's like 2 pastries. That's like 400 and something calories. So that's awesome. And then at night I'll eat noodles. So I'll have like ramen, or I'll get like backpacking meals, which are really good. And so that'll have like, protein and other stuff in it. So it's a lot of just whatever, when I'm shopping, it's whatever's cheap and high in calorie and lightweight. Initially, I was nervous about bears because people in Alaska they are really proud of their bears, and they like to try and scare people, saying our bears are scarier than other people's bears, even though they're grizzlies. It's like the same grizzlies you get in the Yukon, but Alaskans they love it. They love scaring people. I think it just makes them happy. And so the first grizzlies I came across were in Denali National Park, and it was a sow and her 2 cubs, and they didn't care. They just ignored me. They're just eating berries or whatever. I ended up camping maybe like 5 kilometers away from them, and just wasn't an issue. And the first few solo male grizzlies I came across, I was a little nervous because like the first one ran maybe like 10-20 meters in front of me, and I was just like, bear mace, and just like was like so nervous to just even continue down the road. And then after a while I realized the bear just kept running in the woods. It didn't care. And so after a while I just would, you know, keep biking. If there's a grizzly on the side of the road, I would just like, you know, keep pedaling by, not even worrying about like getting nervous. I was just like, hi bear, enjoy your food. And you know, that's just what I would do. So now I'm just like, hey, you're a friendly, cuddly animal that I'm not gonna get too close to. The day was titled, dude, seriously, fuck this rain. I've been rained on a lot, but I did end up taking a rest day at the Liard Hot Springs, and I met a lot of cool people there. And one of them, they were driving their van, whitewater rafting and kayaking, all the way down to Argentina from Alaska. They were just doing it a little quicker than me because they have a motor. But I also met my friend Johnny, and we ended up being the last two people in the hot springs that night. We ended up staying in there till around midnight, and so when we were just floating, just like on our backs, holding onto logs to keep us, keep our heads out of the water, she just like randomly said, she is from France, she's from Brittany in France, and she's like, do you want to learn how to say fuck in French? And I was just like, of course, I would love to learn that. And so she's like, it's just putain. So she's like, when you get to Paris, just like, if you bump into someone, just go putain, putain. What, like 100 and, like, I'll just round up, I've done like 160 days. That's like, what, 5-6 months of biking? I don't know. And so I did about 9,500 kilometers so far, and I have probably at least 21,000 kilometers left. But I'm estimating it's probably going to take me at least a year and a half more to get down to Ushuaia in Argentina. And it could take longer because I don't have a time scale. I might want to hang out in certain places longer than others. I may go other places that I haven't heard of or thought of going to yet. So I'm very open, so I just usually think about another year and a half or 2 years. So some of the people I've met on this trip, like that's one of my favorite things about bike touring, is just all the people you meet along the way, and you get to hear their stories, they get to hear your stories. And like from the moment I like set foot in Alaska, I started meeting some of the most amazing people. My first day in Denali National Park, I was just going to like hang out by the little store by the campground I was staying at. I was taking a rest day before I was gonna bike. I think I planned it was like 3 or 4 days through on the park road on my bike. And I saw two women with their bikepacking bikes all set up. They had just finished doing that ride. And so I was like, hey, I don't see too many women, other women doing this, so I struck up a conversation. And we exchanged names, and we just started swapping stories. And it was just such a lovely time. They invited me back to their campsite to like hang out and have dinner with them. So did that, and just really amazing women who've like done some of the most amazing like trips and adventures like that I can only dream of. And at the end of the night, I just said, hey, if you want to go on a bike tour sometime, just maybe we want to exchange information. And Sarah looked at Lucy and was like, yeah, why not? And she wrote her email down, and it turns out like I just like did a triple take, and she's just like, yeah, so you know me? And I was like, yeah, I have your books. It was literally Sarah Outen. She's a British adventurer who's circumnavigated the Northern Hemisphere and rode solo across the Indian Ocean. Like, one of the most badass women you'd ever meet, and I just randomly met her in Alaska. I was leaving British Columbia and going into Alberta, and that was my first day where I really experienced like the wildfire smoke. At first I thought it was fog, but then my throat started getting dry and sore, and I was like, nope. And I could start smelling it, and I was like, this is gonna be a rough day. And it was just like a yellow haze just all throughout the day. But I lucked out even more. I had the wind in my face, and it was also my uphill day. So I had 3 strikes, and like when I was doing this, like I feel like if I only had 2 of the 3 bad things, I probably could have made it just fine. But since I had uphill, wind in my face, and really heavy smoke, I just didn't stand a chance. And I ended up getting extremely dizzy, to the point where I did vomit on a few occasions. And this was really bad because I couldn't make up any distance. I had no way to replenish my food supplies. Thankfully, a guy driving by who worked for the energy company, he stopped and gave me like 2 little chewy granola bars. Not many calories, but it was something. And I ended up getting to a proper campground, like 30 kilometers shy of Grand Cache that night. I think I ate the 2 chewy granola bars for dinner, which are like 90 calories each. And that left me with a Cliff Bar and a half for the next day to get me the rest of the way to Grand Cache for food. So I definitely went to bed hungry that night. But luckily the next day it woke up and it was a relatively clear day. So I was able to get to town, although quite hungry when I arrived. And that was also a day I did my first laundry in a month. So that was a good benefit. And I got to Hinton the next day. That's a decently long ride, it's like 140 kilometers. And the forecast for the smoke and the wildfires were pretty bad. A new fire just sprouted up in Banff, and I was like, I can't risk biking through the parks just to have more of that smoke inhalation. So it was sad leaving the mountains, but it was time for me to turn into the plains of Canada and head to Minnesota for the wedding and leave the mountains behind for a while, which was sad. I forgot I camped in this campground, oh not campground, just like the city park in, what time was that? Yorkton, Saskatchewan or Manitoba? No, it's Saskatchewan. And there's just like a city park, no one cares in Canada, you can just camp wherever you want. And there are these people, I thought they were LARPing at first, but they were actually like legit practicing medieval warfare for like fairs and stuff, so that was pretty cool. Wait, I titled something twice? I did Hot Tub Time Machine twice. I can't do that. I need to call it Hot Tub Time Machine 2 to be proper. I don't reuse day names. One thing that has played heavily on my mind when planning this trip was the fact that I'm a transgender woman. It's that made it logistically a little more difficult initially to start this, just how to get hormones throughout it, and just everything about that. And also just running into people who might not necessarily accept me for who I am, because whatever their personal values are, and they might not think LGBT people are, let's say, sane. They might think we have a mental disability. A few times when I was in like places in Alaska, I saw like there's pictures in a bathroom, and it's like the 2 little babies looking down the diapers, like, see, look, there is a difference. I'm like, really? I wish I saw it before I spent money here. Like, there's no point. But thankfully, like most people, especially like in Alaska, they just don't want anyone telling them what to do, so they just don't care. That was most everyone. They're like, if they misgendered me accidentally, and I corrected them, they're like, oh, you do you. The last thing they want is the government telling them what to do, and that also plays into how they treat other people. Like they're not going to tell you what to do. They just want to be left alone, and they'll leave you alone. Whereas in Canada, I met, it was just the nicest people. Like everyone just wanted you to be happy, and they wanted to help you, and they, if they accidentally misgendered me, and like they were just heartfelt apologies, and they just go on, and that was it. And I saw so many like all gender bathroom signs throughout, even just in like rural Canada. And I'm like, that's so cool. Like you don't necessarily see that in rural US in a lot of places. So I took a few pictures out and left them on reviews of places. I was like, you're cool here. So, but that's being trans and traveling through pretty conservative Catholic countries in Central and South America is something that I've given a lot of thought to. Whether or not how open I'm going to be with it. Currently I bike with a rainbow flag and the trans pride flag on the back of my bike. I don't know if I'll always have those on there in certain places just because of personal safety. But it's something I'll have to tackle as I get there. I would hate to have to take those off, because I want to, one of my philosophies in life is I'm a very outgoing person, and I want to answer people's questions, because if most people in rural places might not have ever knowingly interacted with a trans person, and if they interact with me and they see that I'm just a normal person, I'm not going to abuse their children in the bathroom or whatever fear that they have. They might just start seeing trans people as people and not as something separate entirely. And so I feel like one conversation with a random person can go a long way to changing their heart and mind. So, I am to an extent concerned with my safety. I'm not exactly sure how much that is to do with being a trans woman or just being a woman traveling. So far, the few times I've been creeped out on the road, it had nothing to do with me being transgender. It just had to do with me being a solo female traveler. I maybe pitched a tent in a maybe less than ideal location. But so far, my LGBT status hasn't had a negative effect on my trip. I've been told that you can't do this. It's gonna be so hard. Like, it's, you know, how can you like give up on your life and like, you know, quit your job and all this stuff to follow your dreams? And it's like, well, why not? Like, it's my dream to do that. Why should I feel obligated to like stay in a job I hated, to do something I hated at the expense of my happiness? And I mean, if it's safe, if you feel you can do it and you want to do it, you have the drive, follow your dreams. It can be a massive dream, but go for it. And one thing that's going to help along the way is setting small goals. Like, I may have this massive goal to go to bike from Alaska to Argentina, but that's not, I don't look at that goal every day. I look at a goal of, if I'm going up a big hill, I look 2 meters in front of me and like, I see a crack in the road. That's my next goal. And once I've reached that, I get a little happier, and so that makes it so much easier to go. So set small goals for yourself, and that lead to your bigger one, and it makes it all that much easier because you feel so much better when you complete something.